Before you begin modeling your tree, you will need to collect some background information. You will need to decide which genus and species you will be modeling. For example, the maple genus, Acer, has many different species. Sugar maple, Acer saccharum, differs significantly in overall shape, mature height, and shape of the leaves, all aspects that will be visible in Trainz. You will also need to decide where your tree is to be located. Is it intended to be deep in the woods, where competition with surrounding trees will force the branches and leaves to be closer to the top? Or is it a specimen tree out by itself in the middle of a lawn or park? You will also need to decide what age of tree you want to model. This can affect the shape and appearance. For example, a mature maple has rough gray bark on its trunk, and gray but less rough bark on the branches. Twigs and young growth have a darker, more reddish bark. I'm going to model this 12 feet tall sapling growing in a tree nursery. Maple trees tend to set out branches 2 at a time, although not always, as one bud may fail to develop. So for the sugar maple, we need to create the trunk and the branches accordingly. We can consider the trunk to be that portion up to the first branching. From there on, one branch becomes dominant at each branch point. These initial branches form the primary branches. Each branch in turn can branch to form the secondary branches, and so on. To create the branches, open Blender in the Layout workspace and Object Mode, and switch to Front View. For this tutorial, I have provided a reference image, for which a link is in the description of this video. Add the reference image as a background image. Keyboard shortcut, select the Add menu, then Image, then Background, then locate and load the reference image. Move the image up on the Z-axis so the bottom of the trunk rests on the X-axis. Rename the image Image Sapling. Switch to Top View. Keyboard shortcut, select the Title key, and from the Pie menu, select Top. In Object Mode, add a Bezier curve. Keyboard shortcut, select the Add menu, select Curve, then select Bezier. Switch to Edit Mode, and delete the vertices. Keyboard shortcut, select Ctrl plus the X key. Switch to Front View. From the toolbar, select the Pen tool. Zoom in and start at the bottom, adding several points to outline the trunk. Smooth the curve. Keyboard shortcut, select the A key, select the V key, then select Automatic. If need be, adjust the curve. Keyboard shortcut From the toolbar, select the Move tool, select a vertex, and left mouse button select the handles or white circle and drag. Switch to Object Mode, and in the Properties window under the Object Data Properties tab, expand the Geometry tab. Under Bevel, enter a depth of 0.02, or what creates a trunk of sufficient thickness. Set the resolution to 1, which will create a hexagonal-sided trunk. Since we are going to be adding several branches, add the Bezier curve to the Quick Favorites menu. Keyboard shortcut, select the Add menu, select Curve, then right mouse button select Bezier, and select Add to Quick Favorites. Now all you have to do to add a Bezier curve is keyboard shortcut select the Q key, then select Bezier. Continue adding the primary branches, then add the secondary branches. Set the thickness of the first primary branch that extends the trunk to 0.015. Set the remaining branches to a thickness of 0.01. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as sugarmaple01.blend. In order to taper the branches, we first need to convert them from curves to meshes. In Object Mode, select the branches, including the trunk, and convert them to meshes. Keyboard shortcut, select the Object menu, select Convert, then select Mesh. In Edit Mode and Edge Selection Mode, select an edge near the tip of one of the branches. Zoom in on the selection. Keyboard shortcut, select the number pad period key. Select the loop of edges at the tip of the branch. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus Alt plus left mouse button. With the loop still selected, zoom back out and select Front View. Toggle on Proportional Editing. Select Scale. Keyboard shortcut the S key. With the scroll wheel, adjust the sphere of proportional editing influence, the circle, to include all of the branch except the base next to the trunk. Scale in the face at the tip of the branch to taper the branch. A faster sequence for tapering a branch would be to select the branch in Object Mode, then switch to Edit Mode. I use custom keyboard shortcuts F1 and F2 to switch between Object Mode and Edit Mode, but you can use the Tab key or the menus. Select an edge near the tip of one of the branches and zoom in. Select the loop of edges at the tip of the branch, then select the whole branch. Keyboard shortcut, select the A key. Zoom out by selecting the number pad period key. Then delete the last step. Keyboard shortcut, select Ctrl plus the Z key. Taper the remaining branches. Save your work. Save your Blender file as sugarmaple02.blend. Before we can connect the branches, we need to rotate the branches on the Z-axis to create a three-dimensional tree. On a sugar maple, branches not only tend to be generated in pairs, but each branch of a pair is positioned 180 degrees relative to the other. Let's start by changing the names of the first two branches to reflect that they are the bottom and top of the trunk, respectively. I added a 0 to the beginning of the names, so they would appear at the top of the list in the outline window. Begin at the bottom of the tree. In Object Mode, select the branch. Switch to Edit Mode and Edge Selection Mode, and select the bottom loop of edges. Move the 3D cursor to the loop of edges. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the S key, select cursor to selected. Switch to Object Mode, and with the branch selected, move the origin to the 3D cursor. Keyboard shortcut, select the Object menu, select Set Origin, and then select Origin to Cursor. With the branch selected, in Top View, rotate it on the Z-axis. Keyboard shortcut the R key, then the Z key, and drag. Moving the origin of a branch can be facilitated with a Blender add-on Origin to Selected. Available from Blender Market for $1 US. In Edit Mode and Edge Selection Mode, after selecting the loop of edges at the base, one only has to use a keyboard shortcut to set the origin to the loop of edges. I use Alt plus the 7 key. With Auto Go to Object Mode turned on, the add-on will automatically take you back to Object Mode. Rotate each of the branches. Where there are pairs, position each 180 degrees opposite the other. Rotate the primary branches first. Where a primary branch has secondary branches, parent the secondary branches to the primary branch before rotating. Keyboard shortcut, select the secondary branches, then the primary branch, then select Ctrl plus the P key and select Object. Select the secondary branches with the primary branch and rotate. Once the primary branches and their associated secondary branches have been rotated, rotate the secondary branches individually so that they are more or less horizontal. Now join the trunk bottom and trunk top meshes. Zoom in on the top of the trunk bottom mesh. Switch to Edit Mode and Vertex Selection Mode, and toggle on wireframe and X-ray modes. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus the Z key. Delete the top loop of vertices. Switch back to Object Mode. Select both the trunk bottom and the trunk top meshes and join. Keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the J key. Switch to Edit Mode and Edge Selection Mode. Select the end loops of edges and bridge. Keyboard shortcut, select the Edge menu, then select Bridge Edge Loops. Toggle off Proportional Editing if it is still active. Select Edge Loops and scale to smooth the transition. Rename the trunk top mesh Trunk. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as sugarmaple03.blend. To facilitate manipulation of the branches, in the outline window, let's move Image Sapling into the collection. Rename the collection Aids and hide. Now select the first branch, the Bezier Curve 002 mesh. Switch to Edit Mode and Vertex Selection Mode, and toggle on Wireframe and X-ray modes. Circle select the first 4 loops of vertices and delete. Toggle off Wireframe and X-ray modes, and switch back to Object Mode. Select the Bezier Curve 002 mesh. Then select the trunk mesh and join. Keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus the J key. Switch to Edit Mode. If need be, select the loop of edges on the trunk and dissolve, or move them to above or below the end of the branch. Keyboard shortcut Shift plus Alt plus left mouse button, then the G key followed by the G key and drag. Switch to Face Selection Mode. Select the two faces on the trunk opposite the end of the branch and delete. Switch to Edge Selection Mode. Select the two loops of edges and bridge. To facilitate bridging, move Bridge Edge Loops to the Quick Favorites menu. Repeat the process for the remaining branches. If a primary branch has secondary branches, select both the secondary branches and the primary branch when joining the branches to the trunk. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as sugarmaple04.blend. In this video, I wanted to show you how to create a branch skeleton from scratch. However, an alternative method would be to use Blender's add-on Sapling, as did Alexandr Kiryanov in part 1 of his series Blender 3D Make a Tree, Modeling and View V Unwrap. A link is provided in the description of this video. Sapling provides a few presets to get you started. Alexandr Kiryanov used one of these presets, then pruned the mesh to achieve the shape he was looking for. To UV unwrap, we need to separate the branches and mark a seam the length of the branch. To facilitate unwrapping, I use custom keyboard shortcuts, the 8 key to mark seam and the 9 key to clear seam. Isolate each branch with a seam and mark a seam the length of the branch and the trunk. You can focus in on where you are working by selecting an edge and then selecting the number pad period key. You can toggle on wireframe and X-ray mode to select edges that are somewhat hidden. Once you have finished marking seams, switch to the UV editing workspace. In the UV editing window, add a UV map. Keyboard shortcut, select the image menu, select New, name the map UV Map, and select OK. In the 3D editor window, select the mesh and unwrap. Keyboard shortcut, select the U key and then select Unwrap. In the UV editing window, check for errors. Here the UV map has not unwrapped correctly. Select the UV sync selection icon and select the UV island. Keyboard shortcut, select an edge, then with the mouse cursor hovered over the island, select the L key. In the 3D editor window, locate the island. The branch is missing a seam along its length. Add the seam and unwrap again. The error has been corrected. Save your UV map. Keyboard shortcut, select the image menu, select Save As, and select Save As Image. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as sugarmaple05.blend. Before texturing, we will reduce the poly count. Switch to the Layout workspace. Select the Overlay chevron, and then check Statistics. My current poly count is 10,028. In Object Mode, select the Modifier tab in the Properties window. Then select Add Modifier and select Decimate. With Collapse selected, set the ratio to 0.2. That gives me a poly count of 2005 without distorting the mesh. Apply the modifier. Keyboard shortcut, select the chevron, then select Apply. You can manually remove edge loops from the branches. In Edit mode and Edge Selection mode, and with wireframe and X-ray modes toggled on, select an edge ring. Keyboard shortcut Control plus Alt plus left mouse button. Deselect alternate edges. Keyboard shortcut, select the Selection menu, then select Checker Deselect. Expand the selection of your edge loops. Keyboard shortcut, select the Selection menu, select Select Loops, then select Edge Loops. Select Dissolve. Keyboard shortcut, the X key, then select Dissolve Edges. We are now going to use the Blender add-on PBR Painter to add a PBR material texture set. For texturing, we could separate the branches into trunk, primary branches, and new growth, and texture each differently. However, I'm going to apply Bark 001 from AmbientCG.com to all of them. Download the 2K PNG files. We will use color, normal GL, and roughness. Switch to the PBR Painter workspace and drag the bottom border of the 3D editor window down to enlarge the 3D editor window. In the outline window on the left, select the trunk mesh and rename it Tree. In the 3D editor window's Properties panel, with the PBR Painter tab selected, select New to add a new material. Name the material Branches. In the Properties window on the right, select Set Up Material for PBR Painter and select OK. Select the new layer icon and name the new layer Bark. Under Filled Painted, keep Filled and select OK. Select the Import Material icon. Locate and load the Bark 001 color, normal GL, and roughness. Select Refresh to see the PBR material texture set on your model. I think the texture is a little large. In the Properties window, scroll down until you see Texture Mapping. Set Scale XY to 80 and 80, respectively. This would be a good time to save your work. Save your Blender file as sugarmaple06.blend. For now, we have completed modeling and texturing the branches.